Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second event of the Messaging Maven. I'm Tomikas, the CEO and managing partner of Messente Communications, and I will be the host today. So, as the title already suggests, there are some intriguing facts and intriguing stats to share today, and mainly I'll be talking about why text messaging is such an effective form of promotional marketing or using it as an effective form of customer communication. Now, quick stats just to start off with. This is one of the most known metrics that people know about SMS. This is what's also very often shared and what makes it such an effective marketing channel. 98% open rate within the first 5 minutes, right? Plus the fact of reach. If you think about SMS, every phone is capable of having text messages sent to them. So essentially every subscriber is also a potential client in that sense of someone you can reach throughout the world, which makes it the broadest reaching channel as well as the highest open rate channel. So it makes perfect sense for it to also be a strong marketing channel. But one of the things about the open rate that these days is changing, and this is probably one of the first practical takeaways of this session as well, just to get everybody on their way, is that the way we consume text messages is also changing. So we're moving from opening a text message to glancing at a text message, right? It's something on our notification bar that we see, which means that when you actually communicate with people, and very often text messages are a great way to send promotional campaigns, the hook of that campaign and actually getting people to be interested in that campaign needs to be contained within the length of that notification bar and within the length of what is the first thing that people see. First few sentences, first few words, that needs to be the trigger, that needs to be the hook right off the bat if you want to make it as effective as possible. But the question is, why should you use it at all? Like, what are the actual stats? What is the maths behind why is it 9 times more effective and 15 times cheaper than Google Ads, right? It's a pretty bold claim, but the math does actually support it. So let's start with click-through rate, or CTR. The average CTR for a messaging campaign is between 17 and 45% roughly. Some have even seen higher than 45%, and very rarely do you see anything below 17% in terms of click-through rate. For comparison, the average click-through rate of a Google ad is 3%. Same for something along the lines of email, 2-3%, sometimes 4%, but it is significantly lower in comparison to a text messaging campaign. So that's the first big differentiator, and that's where the 9 times more effective comes in. So if your average CTR is anywhere between 17 to 45% compared to 3% on Google Ads, then it's a minimum of 9, a maximum of significantly more in terms of the actual effect that you're achieving from using that particular channel, right? But what are the highest and most converting forms of messaging campaigns? The first and usually the highest form of converting campaigns, where the actual CR, not the click-through rate, but the actual conversion rate is on average around 17%, is what's known as dropped cart messages. So essentially, you're incentivizing a person to continue their action that they've already kind of decided to do by incentivizing them to carry it out. So let's say that you're an e-commerce platform. A client, for example, has done a purchase, or not done a purchase, but filled their cart with stuff that they're at least interested in or looking to buy. And they've gone off the website. They haven't really completed the purchase for, let's say, an hour or two. And then you automatically trigger a message to go to them and give them some form of a discount to incentivize them to continue and actually finish that process and finish that purchase. It's one of the most effective forms of actually using messaging campaigns to drive purchases and drive those actual conversations forward. And it actually applies to other forms as well. When you can incentivize an existing action or an existing decision that a person has made by making that decision easier to do or more easy to justify compared to the previous situation where they dropped that decision, those types of situations are some of the most effective ones for using business messaging, right? Give them 10% off, give them 10 euros off, give them something to incentivize continuing down that particular route. Another fun fact, coupons that are texted are 10 times more effective than coupons that are just handed out physically. Makes a lot of sense. It's with you. Our phones are much more often with us than our wallets are, than anywhere we might store coupons in. So anytime you give somebody some form of a voucher or a coupon or something that they can utilize in one or another place, or a code, it makes a lot more sense via text message, because it's also much more easily accessible, much more easily used, and more top of mind when they're actually looking to make purchases, looking to go to places, or if they're choosing between restaurants in a city, for example. If you've sent them some form of a discount code, they're much more likely to then use that discount code and go to your restaurant as compared to another one, simply because it makes more sense and they have a voucher for that. Another form of effective ones is anything related to specific notifications that are related to either loyalty rewards. Let's say that you've been a member for 2 years, you've completed 100 purchases, whatever. So loyalty rewards for sticking with the brand for a long time has a feel-good effect if you then present them with an additional voucher, additional code, or maybe even a free gift, for example. Same goes for birthdays or other specific celebrations that help them understand that you actually care about them in a way as well. If you send a birthday reminder via an email and people don't check their promotional folder, for example, in their Gmail for 3 weeks, then they won't see it. But if you send a text message, they will. And it also means that your brand is associated more with immediate communication as compared to someone that just sends an email and it gets lost in the shuffle. And then what's a more effective form, or what's the most effective form of discount that you can use? The most effective one that's actually considered to be what's called a dollar discount versus a percentile discount that's usually considered to be the second most effective. What this means is that if your promotional text message, for example, says that order within the next 24 hours and get 10 euros off your purchase, versus order within the next 24 hours and get 10% off your first purchase. So 10 euros off versus 10% off. And why that 10 euros versus 10% is more effective is because it shows an immediate tangible effect, or an immediate tangible gain that the person actually receives. So when you have a percentile discount, even if it might be bigger on average than the 10 euros off, it does put us in a position where we have to think, okay, so how much is my average purchase? How much did I purchase last time? What am I using it this time for? Et cetera, et cetera. It makes us question the decision more, and it makes us put in work to understand the immediate benefit or the tangible benefit of what I'm doing. When it is a specific amount, it allows us to immediately understand what the gain is right now. When I make this purchase, this is what I'll save specifically, instead of making it rely on what your purchase history is or how much you've done, or needing to do mental math for that. The easier you make that decision, the easier you make that value, and the easier the perception of that value is, the easier it is for people to make a decision on that purchase that is beneficial to anybody who is running that promotion. And it actually carries over into other forms as well. If you're using text messaging for reminders, for example, the clearer the reminder, the more specific, the more easy it is, the easier it is to understand. If you write the lengthy text, then your reminder might not be seen. But if it is, you have a dentist appointment with this doctor tomorrow at 2, this is the address, this is the cabinet, and that's it, and you can fit that into 160 characters, it is much more likely to be effective. It's all about being effective. It's all about using the limited amount of attention that you are given at any space of time to create that trigger, to create that conversion in that situation as well. We've said that it's effective. We've shown why it's 9 times more effective, mainly because comparing the click-through rates between different brands and the way that you can actually reach a CR with using business messaging is very, very strong. But what's the cost side of it? So I said it's 15 times cheaper, right? How do I get to that number? Well, the first aspect of that is the click-through rate itself, because we know how many clicks you will get per campaign, roughly. And then we also know what the average global market price is for an SMS these days. And when you calculate those together, you get cost per click, right? So the average global market price right now is around 6 cents. 2 years ago, at the onset of COVID in 2020, it was 3 cents. So the global average market price has increased by 100%, which is a major increase in pricing compared to what it was before. And this is one of the reasons why pricing has become a big topic in messaging as well, why so many companies are talking about it. And the cost aspect is such a rampant topic. But at the same time, a lot of companies are really forgetting to talk about value, because this is what's more important than cost. What's the actual value that is bringing you in? So if you think the average global market price of 6 cents and then multiply it with the actual CR rate as well, how many clicks are you actually going to get for your big campaign? It means the actual cost per click for a business messaging campaign is anywhere between 13 cents to 40 cents, roughly on average. That's what you're expecting to pay on average for every click. In comparison, if you're using Google Ads, it's 2 to 4 euros per click. So let's say take an average of between 13 and 40. Let's make it 25, and then compare that to 2 euros to 4 euros. That's where your effect comes from. If you take the average of 2 to 4, it's 3, and there you go. That's your big number that comes in from there as well. That's why it is still significantly cheaper than the alternative. And the fun fact is, if you actually use the comparison of how many companies use Google Ads versus how many use business messaging for their promotional campaigns, for example, then the use of promotional campaigns is in the single digits, 5 to 7%, sometimes 3%, depending on the segment and the market. And on Google Ads, it reaches above 50%, sometimes even 80% of a market using Google Ads for the digital business, which is quite crazy if you think about it, that Google Ads is a significantly more expensive and less effective channel as compared to business messaging, yet it's not used. So you have a cost per click of cents versus euros. You have an effect rate of single-digit percent versus multi-digit percent. From there, you should already see the difference in why business messaging is so much more effective. But it gets even better when you take into consideration the variations in markets. So every market has a different market price. Some are below 6 cents, some are above 6 cents. So if you have a market, let's say in Europe, where the pricing tends to quite often fall under the 6 cents range, or at least float around that, then the stats are safe. But if you have a market where the business message actually costs 3 cents or maybe 2 cents, those markets exist as well, then you're talking about another 3x decrease in terms of cost per click. Because if you're then calculating it based off of 2 cents, not 6 cents, then the rate of what it costs falls down dramatically as well. So then you're talking about a cost per click of maybe 5 cents to maybe 20 cents at max, which again is very cheap, and it makes it a very valuable tool to use. And it gets even more interesting when you take rich messaging into consideration as well. Now, rich messaging on average tends to be more expensive. Depending on the market, it can be anywhere from 20% more expensive to sometimes 2-3x more expensive. But at the same time, on average, you get something like 20 to 40%. Off the top of my head, I would say that's the usual range that you will be probably falling into, about 20 to 40% more expensive. But on the example of two clients that have run multiple campaigns in different markets, one in Bulgaria, one in Vietnam, for example, they've run campaigns on Viber and then compared the head-to-head results between a business messaging campaign that's SMS-based and then a business messaging campaign that's Viber-based, and then compared the results of the two to see which has a higher CR. And SMS already has a very high CR and a high click-through rate, as we've demonstrated so far. But then when they put it into that rich context and created an even more engaging customer experience, they got a 3x return compared to the business messaging campaign. So on top of what SMS already is, and it's an effective channel, on the campaign that they run, they got 3x in terms of return on investment than they did before. So those numbers, for any marketer that is listening or anybody who actually sees this, those are astronomical, aren't they? In terms of just the value that you're bringing in. Yes, when you send out 10 million messages, it is going to cost a fair amount of money, but it's going to bring orders of magnitude of money back. If you think about what's your conversion rate, what's your actual value of conversion, and when you put that into context, the amount of money that you spend compared to what you're actually taking from there, what you're bringing in, is significantly bigger. That's why value is one of the most important things that you need to measure when you're comparing channels. And value for value, dollar for dollar, SMS is one of the best valued communication channels and one of the most effective communication channels that you could ever use. You don't have to believe me about it. Just look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. And if you want to try it out yourself to see how it actually functions in a real life scenario. But take into consideration some of the things we talked about, or some of the things that I covered. First, make sure that it's short enough to properly convert, that you're also taking into consideration the current habits of people who consume notifications and consume the text that come in. So they're glancing much more often. Take into consideration what are the most effective means of using business messaging. What are the most effective scenarios to use them in? Like, for example, dropped cart notifications or incentivizing loyalty programs per day specific events. Take into consideration that one of the most effective ways of getting people to get over the line or convert is using a dollar discount. So an actual specific monetary discount written out within the text message that gives them an understanding of specifically what are they actually gaining. So the gain understood is immediate. So the decision becomes easier because of it. And then compare the value to what you're getting. And I'm fairly certain, based on everything we've seen before, that the channel itself will provide more value, even if it costs 10x compared to what it is right now, because the stats are still there. Cool. That's pretty much it from my side. That's the hard overview of how things are, what things are. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I'll gladly answer those as well in terms of messaging. Would it make sense to combine SMS with email or other channels to optimize the costs? Absolutely. It always makes sense to use an omni-channel strategy. One of the main things that people really need to take into consideration is that if you look at customer communication, you need to look at it as a whole. SMS has a place in there, but SMS can't replace the values of another channel. If you need to share a large amount of visuals, if you want to share a large amount of text, then email is still a more effective channel to do that immediately. And people are used to consuming that type of content over email. But if you need an immediate trigger, if you need a reminder, if you need a fast-acting campaign that reaches a person immediately, use business messaging. And then take into consideration the variety in use cases in terms of timing as well. People don't want to get as many text messages, but they're used to getting more emails. So if you email somebody 4 times a week or 3 times a week, they probably won't unsubscribe. But if you every week text message a person 3 times, then they are going to unsubscribe. So you need to take into consideration the whole customer journey, the whole customer life cycle, and understand what is the value of that single instance of communication that you're looking to put forward, and then make sure that you're using the best possible channel to convert for that particular instance, taking into consideration the pros, the cons, the costs, and everything else associated with it. So yes, use it in combination and make sure you use a variety of channels to make a very good customer experience. More questions. Do you usually see the effect of an SMS campaign right away, or should you carry out multiple campaigns before deciding whether to stick with SMS? Good question. So you should be seeing an effect from the first campaign quite immediately, especially if people at least know to be aware of it or see the effect of it. SMS is an immediate channel, which means that it gets there quite instantly. So if you time it right, and if you segment it right, this is also understanding where and to whom to send at the right period of time, it should be immediate as well, right? The results should come in quite quickly. If you're incentivizing some form of an activity, or apply it in the scenario that I said, where it's a dropped cart notification or a dropped cart incentivizing, for example, when you put it there, you should start seeing results quite quickly. Because if you take into consideration the CTR, and they take into consideration your average conversion from that as well, you should be seeing effects quite quickly. It's a matter of making sure that you don't make mistakes when you're setting up the actual campaign, that you take the advice from professionals in messaging to understand, how should I set it up? What's the timing that I should send it out? What are the days that I send it out? What's the frequency? How should I personalize? What's the hook should I use? How should I make it work? Because there is a lot of nuance in this game, just as there is in writing a good email from a marketing perspective. The same thing goes into business messaging as well. But once you take those nuances into consideration, create a good campaign, you should be able to see the results immediately from first campaign onwards, not from the 10th or 11th campaign. Good. More questions? Nope, seems not. Anyways, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for the questions as well. I hope I gave you sufficient answers on those as well. And I'll see you next time for the next Messaging Maven event. Stay tuned for the updates of when that's coming up. And let me know if there are any specific topics you want us to cover, or specifics that you want us to talk about, like very practical steps of setting up a campaign, or where in the customer lifecycle we think customer communication via business messaging would be most useful. Have a great evening, and thank you everyone for joining.